I'm surprised that you don't know this music by heart at this point, Dennis. Come on. Oh, you know what? It might be. I think I got so bored of like the introduction of this playlist that I skipped the first couple of songs. But these are the first 2 songs from the playlist. That's maybe why. Might be it. Hello, everybody. Let me switch over to... hold up. What are we doing here? There we go. Fix this up. I still don't know why that happens. There we go. It's better. Hey, Henrik. Got Dennis, got Bodie, you got Peter, Megal. Lovely to see you all. How are you all doing? Got a busy Whoop Wednesday coming up. I think we got... How many people do we have? 16 in total. Pretty chunky. I think there's 1 or 2 that we're gonna skip because they didn't really ask any questions. So we're gonna do that to make our lives easier. Just as a reminder for people that want to participate in Whoop Wednesday, please ask questions, right? Makes it so much easier, both for me and for you, because then we can like focus the feedback on something rather than just having like a talk that's like an hour long per piece, which is just not doable. So I appreciate all the people who did though. Hey Darpan! Hey ho! I think... Darpan, you're new to the community, right? Welcome. Lovely to have you. Young Crisp as well. Good to see you too. Right, so for people that are new to the concept of Whip Wednesday, it's basically where I take like 2, probably in this case like 2.5 hours, to just go through like people that need feedback on like a weekly basis. So yeah, it's mostly environment art, right? I tend to help with like other things as well, but obviously like I'm an environment artist myself, so I rather specialize in environment art. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump in, shall we? Hello, Alex. Hello, Ismail. Where do we begin? Let's see. What kind of sequence do we do? Let's start with Jonah. What I'm doing, I have Discord on my other screen, right? So we have, I'll put it up just a second so you can see what I'm doing. So we got all of these lovely people that want feedback today. I just basically take the images from here and then I just read through like what they posted just to know what we're going to be talking about, right? Just gonna put that back over here and let's dive in. Jonah, where are you in this list? Here you are. Really lovely work already. I like what I'm seeing. The thumbnail wasn't updated in like a long time. The thumbnail of like the Discord thread. So it looks completely different. So this was like a really nice surprise. First, let's have some context though. So, got my renders done for uni, but I will be looking to polish this up more after the deadline. Any thoughts are greatly appreciated on where the scene is lacking and could improve. Okay, so that's pretty generic, right? Okay, so there are areas where you're currently working on. So, too much contrast and saturation in the rust. The ground material is too bland and lacks tertiary elements like pebbles, twigs, etc. Yeah, I think honestly just having some sort of like bushes or like some sort of like shrubs, right? Just, it doesn't even have to be like pebbles or twigs or something like that, but just having like more variation, right? Because you kind of have like variation going on here. Kind of have like a split between materials, but it would be nice to see like a drier section over here, right? And then have like mud and then have like the wet mud. So kind of really thinking about like how, like where the wetness would go after a certain time, right? So you would have, you would just have like normal dirt, And then you would have mud. And then you would have like really wet mud, right? And then you could vary that up with like footprints as well. So just to add like a little bit more variation in there, right? So the more layers, the more flexibility you have, right? So it's gonna give you a lot of flexibility. And that dirt, you can kind of use that in like the areas that you want to just differentiate from each other, right? So for example, where you have like some sort of shrubbery, probably gonna be like a little bit more dirt. Yeah, and then also where you have like lots of wetness, it would be really nice to have like a border around it, right? And then have like drier sections. That there is like contextual variation that's happening, right? Like we're trying to separate like the wetter areas from like the drier areas. Yeah, so it's good that you're thinking about it. It's not just down to the twigs and the pebbles and all that stuff, right? I think the base variation in the terrain is going to make a much more difference than adding things on top of it, in this case. The rust is going to be interesting. I do agree, the saturation is a bit much. I think also if you have this much rust buildup on like these kind of platings, like there would probably be like way more rusty or like way more dirty, just in general, right? So it's not just like rust and then bare metal. It's again the same thing, right? Like you kind of want to have like a gradient going from rust to like damaged metal to possibly like nice metal, right? But you kind of want to have like a bigger gradient, like a better transition between the two. And that's by adding like a layer in between, right? Hey Bulborb! Hey Puns! Next week, I shall ask for feedback on how to write academic text. Yeah. I'm not gonna... I'm not gonna try to be an expert on that. It's been a while, you know? Especially on academic text. You can try. You can try, Megal. Okay, so that's it on like the terrain, right? So that's pretty good. I just wanted to elaborate on that a little bit. And then you were asking for thoughts on what I could improve. Again, pretty generic stuff, right? So I would honestly look into, yeah, getting like a little bit more variation set up. Just in terms of, you know, you have like little bushes. Like those could make like a huge difference if you just like tuck them away in like some of the corners, right? Because it's also gonna break up like the colors, because the shed itself is red. You have like the green like kind of contrasting against it. That's gonna look really nice. It also helps in distinguishing where like people walk often, right? And where they don't walk. So that's why we kind of tuck them away in the corners, because it kind of makes sense logically. Megal's asking, this was Hunt Showdown inspired, right? Yes, it is. It is. You can tell, right? Like the mood is on point. So yeah. I think honestly though, like the terrain layers are gonna make the biggest difference here by far, because it is such a big point of the scene, right? So the first one would be more terrain variation. Right, that's what we talked about before. And the second one is play around with foliage a little bit more. Because that's going to be nice, just to contrast, like a little bit more contrast and variation in the scene. The rest of it looks really nice. I like what you did with the planks. The planks, they add a lot to the building. They really make it feel like it is really old, right? You could potentially push that further, especially on the silhouette of the building, right? So especially the silhouette here because at the base of it, you're still working with like a straight line, right? And it would be kind of nice to just have that like just like sunken down a little bit, you know? Just add some variation in those straight lines. That's going to be really nice. Same here, right? You're trying to break up the silhouette. So yeah, definitely look into like the silhouettes of things, right? I like what you did with the rest of the scene though. Like, you know, these poles are not straight. They're all sticking at an angle. I would maybe try to finish some of them off with like really rough like sections in between, right? Just to kind of section that off. Again, adding like a little bit of grass underneath it as well. That a lot. Yeah. We talk about this a lot, silhouette breakup, and that's going to be applicable here as well. It's basically looking at the silhouette, and if there's a straight line, try to reduce that. What sort of terrain do you recommend in the background, like with snow? For this one, I wouldn't really add like any terrain, honestly, because we've got like trees in the background, which is quite nice, and not all biomes are gonna be like terrain heavy, right? Like you're not gonna have mountains in the background or something like that. Sometimes you're just like in the plains or whatever, or like in a swampy area, and you're not gonna have like any sort of verticality really, apart from the buildings. So I don't think we need that here. Because it kind of works in like the swampy setting, right? And the trees do a great job of like blocking everything in. So yeah, that's looking really good. Overall, the vibes are really good, you know? So like a plus goes to the mood. Really well done. Like that a lot. And also just like the attention to details, right? Like the planks, you really paid attention to like how the planks are coming off the building. You know that is also like the most important point here. So focusing a lot of your effort on the focal point is a great choice. We got attention to the focal point. That's really well done. Yeah, honestly, so I kind of skipped over the brief overview, right? Final year project, creating a realistic farm environment that could exist in the Hunt universe. If that is like your aim, if you want to work for Crytek, because that's what you say, right? Just have a look at how they do their stuff. It's a really inspiring company to look at for when it comes to, well, first the lighting, right? Because CryEngine is still like known for like its lighting, but also just like the individual artists really know what they're doing when it comes to foliage, but also the terrain. So try to take it as far as they do when it comes to creating the road tracks, for example, right? They have really cool posts on ArtStation where they kind of show off like the different kind of road tracks. Really cool stuff. So yeah, I would advise you to look at that as well. If that is your goal, right? Okay, Jonah, thank you so much for sharing your work. I appreciate it. And also, I think you're new to... Oh no, you're here for a year. You have your 1 year badge. Just, yeah. This project, like, evolved, like, leaps and bounds, though. It's really cool to see you, like, really realize, like, okay, I got to this point because of the uni, right? But I still need to take it further. So great job on that. Okay, next up, we've got Henrik. Henrik is straight in line here. Henrik is new, so welcome to the community. Happy to have you here. A little thing here. Okay. Inspired by the book Demon Cycle, I aim to recreate a church depicted within it. I have no clue about the book, so I'm going in blind on this one. But I aim to learn, enhance my modeling and topology skills. Additionally, I plan to create 2 trim sheets for the first time to familiarize myself with them. And furthermore, I intend to use them as a basis for generating a high poly version to capture finer details. Wait, what? That part is confusing to me. So you're gonna use a trim sheet as a basis to create like a high poly version for that, right? Because normally what the whole point of a trim sheet is that you don't have a high poly version anymore, right? You just straight up use that trim sheet on your meshes, right? On your assets. So that's the whole point of like having a trim sheet, because you can circumvent like the whole baking down from high to low poly, right? I just want to make that really clear. There are some questions here, so let's dive into those. Is the topology acceptable? It's kind of hard to tell, but we're gonna do our best. Yeah, for special prompts, I mean. But yeah, sorry for that. No worries, no worries. I'm just trying to make sure that we've got the basics right? Because I know that sometimes stuff get lost. I just want to make sure. The topology is all right. Topology is all right. You can definitely do way more in terms of like, again, the silhouette of the building, right? That's definitely something to pay attention to. When it comes to... This is where it gets interesting, right? Because when it comes to the tiles, probably a more straightforward and efficient way is to... let me write that here. So for the tiles, right? The roof tiles, what you probably want to do in your case is you did it with geonodes. That's cool. However, what you should do in your case to optimize it a little bit, right, is to you make your texture first, and then you use the height map of that texture to displace what you're doing on top of your roof and get geometry that way, right? So what that looks like is you're going into Blender because you use geonodes, so you're using Blender. Once you have your height map, you plug that into a displace modifier, and then you just have to optimize that afterwards, right? So at that point, what you can do is you can generate your topology based on the height map of the texture, because what you're doing now is you have your geometry, right? But now it becomes really difficult because you need to map like a texture onto that somehow, right? So you need to make like a really specific texture or like a really generic texture, right? So when you do it the opposite way around, when you start with your texture first, you know that your texture is gonna be good enough to then generate your topology from. So it's kind of a little bit backwards, right? But that's probably the way that I would do it. So you would displace that using a height map. And then you just have to like optimize that. You can... What am I looking for? You can just use a decimate modifier, right? And get that to a point where like topology is acceptable. And that's probably also going to be way cheaper than what you have here, because you're not rendering like the back of it, right? And you have like a transition between like all the pieces. So it's going to be like a solid thing as well. Hi Ismail, thank you for the question. So there is, in the tagged community post, there is a post on how you can get into the Discord. So yeah, that is going to optimize like your topology a little bit, right? Because by far, well, maybe apart from these guys, right? They're gonna be like the most dense bit of topology that you're gonna have. So that's about the roof. Then we can also have a look at what we're doing here. And it's actually really interesting that you have these pillars, right? Because they're gonna help us in a massive way. Because that means that we can spend a bit more geometry on the actual pillars, like you're doing already. And remove all the individual bricks here, because we can replace the bricks by parallax occlusion mapping instead. The reason why the pillars are really important to that is because the pillars, they stop you from looking at like glancing angles, where usually POM doesn't do a good job of retaining the illusion that it is faked, right? So I would have the pillars themselves, like you already have, in geometry. So that's going to be geo. And then all the flat surfaces in between are going to be POM. So parallax occlusion mapping. In Unreal? Yeah. In Unreal. That's like a shader trick. I think it's been a while since I used a node specifically, but I think it's just called parallax mapping. So it's a node, you have to plug in your height map and like a bunch of other stuff, and it allows you to use the tidable texture to then make it look like it comes out. Yeah. You're getting the best of both worlds, right? Because you actually want like actual geometry on the pillars. And then have like fake detail in between. Yeah, I saw it in your stream. Yeah, I'm doing the exact same thing. And that's the whole reason why I wanted pillars for my walls. Because I wanted to make sure that I could like stop people from looking at like glancing angles, right? Kind of faking the effect. And it's also cheaper on geometry. Cool. So that's number 2. Let's just call it like POM versus geo, right? And then we have the POM on flat surface, and then we have the geometry on for the silhouettes, right? It's all about those sweet silhouettes. If I can I can learn how to spell it, damn it. Okay, cool. That's great. I'm loving the little presentation, by the way. Like the little maquette, like miniature setup. Looks really cool. Okay, so are there any suggestions for adding more detail or variety in shapes? I'm guessing you're talking about the shapes of the... What shapes are you talking about? Like the shapes of the individual stones, or the shapes of like the buildings themselves? And then, is it appropriate and beneficial to use trim sheets here, one for the wood and one for the stone with the carvings? I'm open to general feedback. Yeah. I would honestly, the way that I would break it up is the large surfaces, right? So that is so. Let me actually this here. So large surfaces is going to be tidables, right? Tidables, and then smaller surfaces are going to be the trim sheets. Right? So that means that the big tower here, that's going to be, it's going to be like a tidable, right? Apart from the small edges here, that's probably going to be like a trim sheet. Right? And that's how you like divide the two up. And then if you want to break down the silhouette, like in your question, right? That's where you just have to add like a bit more geometry and like kind of cut around the tidable that you've created, right? So the tidable is going to have like a certain kind of pattern. And what you want to do is kind of cut around that pattern in a certain way so that it kind of looks like you're modeling around the pattern, right? But you only have to do that in like a couple of sections to make it look like really interesting, you know? Like you just pick like a couple of areas. And that's going to be more than enough to like vary up like the silhouette. Pretty straightforward. You just, yeah, when it comes to making like big buildings like this, you just have to really think in verse most of the time, right? Because you're starting from your textures first, and you're trying to work smart with the assets and the textures that you have available. So yeah. So that would be like your tidables plus geometry, right? Just being smart with your geometry and like cutting around the tidables. But like, not cutting around, but like modeling around. Modeling around those tidables. Yeah. How many textures would you use? It depends on how many you need. Right? So figure that out first. If it doesn't look too detailed enough, then you add another texture, right? So for example, what I can already tell is that for the main building, right? So like these main shapes, for example, you're gonna have one tidable for the whole thing, and then probably like a tidable for the area that's closest to the ground, just to create like a little bit of variation, right? For example, the bottom part could be still plastered, and then the top part, sorry, opposite way around. So the top part could be still plastered, but the bottom part could actually be just like bare stone, right? It doesn't have to be that big. You're probably going to be like something like that, right? And then you just set up a vertex blending shader that uses the height map, and you get some like really nice blending. Yeah. That's the thing. Start with the basics first, right? So make the thing that you're going to use the most. And then for the final touches, what you probably do is you go into Substance Designer, you use the same template, and you just change it up a little bit so that it looks like the bare version of what you were using before, right? And then you got yourself some nice variation, and it's just about blending the two in Unreal. Yeah. Always just, you gotta, let's call it the MVE, right? I've used this term before, but like the minimum viable environment. This comes from like a business term, right? Where it's like the MVP, the minimum viable product. I call it the MVE. You basically just want to get stuff out of there like as soon as possible. And then once you get to a stage where everything is like somewhat textured and it's starting to get shape, that's when it's time to start thinking about the next step, right? And you just level up the whole thing as you go along. So yeah, and then expand when needed, right? Cool. Thanks so much for sharing your work, Henrik. It's gonna be cool to see this evolve, buddy. And like, I love the presentation. Got some really cool ref there as well. I had a look at it before the stream. Yeah, looking forward to it, man. Best of luck. Moving straight on then. We're gonna have a look at another new person. No. Oh, first time posting though. Thanks for the feedback. No worries. Happy to help. We're gonna go to Hith. And Hith is currently working. Oh, so first time posting. So I'm not exactly sure how it works, but I'll give it a try. Thank you so much for posting. Appreciate it. The scene takes place in a maid cafe, like entertainment venue, where customers can enjoy cute sweets and drinks while watching idol-like waitresses perform. Okay. The story has a dark twist, as the main maid persuades customers enchanted here to stay after closing hours. And then make them into human... Oh, okay. So it's like kind of like a murder house, but it's dressed up as like a cute, like, oh, just come and enjoy the tea party. Okay. Okay. Some dark twists going on. I like it. Let's see if we can make a little bit of sense of that, right? So I've been developing this concept for a while now, but I'm having trouble establishing the final layout of the piece, making it believable and practical while also having a focal point. Okay. Okay. We're gonna zoom out a little bit. We're gonna keep it like very big picture for this one, because I think that's gonna be the most relevant, right? So first up, I want to start with something that you brought up yourself. Focal point. For a focal point, it is important to be relevant to the story that you're trying to set up, right? And with your story, you kind of want to like indicate that there might be a twist somewhere, right? That twist is going to be very hard to do in a subtle way if you're not going to have multiple shots, right? Because what you want to do is you want to make this look really inviting, and then kind of have like subtle hints that there's something more sinister going on. But that's going to be really tricky to pull off. So have the focal point linked to the story, right? That's where I would start. So story comes first. Cute killing environment. Yeah, exactly. So story comes first. Make sure to focus on that when it comes to the focal point, right? Then the second thing, I kind of alluded towards it already. The story is going to be, it's very specific in this case. So you're going to have to figure out what the core components are for that story and how you're going to visualize them, right? Because let me actually see. Because yeah, so this is the you got a concept, by the way. But this is the thing, like the concept is purely focused on cute, right? There's no indication here yet that we're going into like something sinister, right? So you have to like find out like how you're gonna visualize the plot twist. Because that's going to be the core of the environment, right? Because if, let's say right? Let's imagine this is like a full 3D environment and we're just looking at this. There would be no indication to me that it is like a more sinister thing. So that's where I would start. So let's... Because you want to visualize the core components of it, right? But obviously you have the idea in your head, so I'm assuming that there's gonna be some idea already there, right? That I'm not seeing just based on the images that we have available now. Making it believable and practical. Okay, so a little bit more about the story though. I'm gonna see if I can help you out with that, right? So we have the core components. So the core components are the main maid. Okay. Right, so that's like the main waitress. And then we got like the human puppets. But you want these human puppets to not be visible immediately. right? Because you kind of want to have some sort of a build-up in your environment where people are like, oh, this is so cute, like I love it, like I love like how this entire space is laid out. It feels so friendly and welcoming. And then once you start looking at it deeper, or if you're doing multiple shots, you can have a secondary shot where it kind of transitions into the third shot where you're kind of seeing, I don't know, the backs of some of the puppets, but like you see like a human actually like contorted into like this mechanical thing, right? So you could do something where you're looking at the front of this and it looks all nice and fluffy, but then as it transitions into like nighttime, we're kind of getting a look, maybe like the stage rotates or something like that, but you're kind of getting like a look at like the back of it, and it's actually just like a human that has like, I don't know, like a fluffy frontal side, right? Something like that. But that's for you to figure out, right? Like how you're going to visualize that. And if you're going to do it in single frame, or multiple frames, right? You gotta watch out with this though, because a single frame is probably the easiest one, right? Because you just have to work towards making a single frame, and there's already gonna be a lot to do in the environment. If you're gonna do multiple frames, that's probably gonna increase the workload, right? So be careful. Be careful when you pick that, and be really specific about the camera points that you use so that you can really condense the scope of the scene down. And then last point that I'll bring up, because you brought up the concept of it being actually believable and practical, this is where you have to look at references. Because you got a really nice concept, right? And that's probably, I'm assuming, based on references, but I'm already seeing like some slight deviations where we have like the staircase coming down and such, right? It's going to be very important to just have a look, like what do fancy diners look like, right? Like how are they laid out? Like where's the kitchen? Like you don't have to visualize the kitchen, but you kind of have to make sure that it kind of makes sense logically to you as like an imaginary guest, right? One thing, so for the first thing that I will say, like start with references, right? But second of all, try to imagine yourself in this location, right? Do a little bit of role playing. And if you are a guest that knows nothing about this place, you know nothing about like the human puppets or whatever, right? We're just gonna assume that we're going in blind. Like, what do you see? Like, how do you get into this place? Like, who are you as a person? Like, are you like super rich? Or, you know, I'm assuming that there has to be like some sort of wealth there. But do like a little bit of role playing, right? And see what information that you can get out of that role play and what you imagine there to be inside of this place. Because both of these, you can then distill that into something practical and believable, right? Like the combination of them two. So yeah, we're gonna keep it like a very big picture. We're gonna keep it like really big picture. I think this is enough to give you a start. The thing that I want to focus on the most is a story, because I've said this like countless times before, right? Like to me, the story is the foundation of an environment. If you have the story and you know what you have to visualize, you can kind of build your environment around that, right? But it's going to come down to like the focal point, right? Like what you said before. So making sure that that is like present and it's also relevant to the story that you want to tell. Okay, really cool though. I like that you did your own concept. It's really interesting to see. Use those skills, right? Like if you ever get lost, like do a little bit like overdraw. Like just draw over your own environments, right? Because iterating in 2D is going to be way quicker than in 3D. So use that to your strengths. Okay, thank you so much, Hith. And again, welcome to the community. Lovely to have you. Oh, sorry, first I'm posting. Keep forgetting. Okay. We're gonna have a look here. So I'm gonna close down this one from Vatican because there wasn't any reply. I basically asked him to ask any questions, but we didn't get any. So unfortunately, we're gonna skip you for this week. So again, just a reminder, whenever you're posting your work here, ask questions, right? That's gonna help the both of us. And then the next one we're gonna go into is from Jacob. Have a look here, Jacob. Some furniture from Tegel Airport. I only flew once from there. It was a really cool airport though. But it could easily expand to a whole terminal. I'm keeping it small and manageable for now, focusing on some detailed props and stylized materials. Cool, that's good. I'm thinking about doing like a grunchier present day version that I could toggle or blend between. Okay. I was wondering whether the tiles on the floor should be modeled or if I can get away with a nice normal map at that scale. Might be worth modeling and then baking down for practice. Now, what you could do, honestly, if it's just gonna be like ground floor, I would honestly just keep a normal map. Especially because you're gonna go for like a more stylized scene, right? So it's gonna be more focused on like the art direction and like the colors that you're gonna use rather than the actual graphical fidelity. I would honestly just keep it to like a normal map. So. Floor tiles, just as like a normal map. Like a normal texture. I think you can get away with that. Sometimes we tend to rely on like getting too fancy too quick, right? But honestly, like a traditional way of doing things, like it's more than good enough. No need to get all fancy with certain things. Might be worth modeling. Any other feedback on the composition, ideas on set dressing, or issues with these initial models would also be appreciated. Interesting. It's interesting. So specifically some furniture from Tegel Airport. Is it gonna be like specific about like Tegel then? Or is it just gonna be like an amalgamation of something? Because I think there could be something really interesting if you make it like specific to an airport. Because then you could kind of tie everything together for that airport, right? Unless you really don't want to do that and you're just picking like the niceties of like what you encounter, right? And just make it into like a really unique diorama. That's also fine. Yeah, I mean, I don't really got anything to say on the current like diorama, right? Like, it's pretty straightforward. I'm kind of wondering what's gonna happen with the background. Because I feel like if you have like an island, but then you're still gonna do a background, that kind of feels... It feels weird if you combine the two. Because the combination of the two feels weird, right? I think in that case, it's probably better to go for just like a flat background. And then, yeah, just go from there, you know? Just have like a single color background, almost go more like, sort of like a very graphical style, right? Something like Deathloop, for example. They have like a very graphical approach, as in like a very graphic design approach to the way that they render their props, right? It's like interesting colors that could then match with like the stylization that you chose. I think fill it in and make an environment. Yeah, but then you're adding like a lot of scope, right? And if you specifically want to make a diorama, then, I mean, the choice is eventually onto Jacob, right? Like if he chooses to expand on it or not. But if you specifically want to make a diorama, then yeah, I would not make like an environment around. Hey Archie! Bummed I missed out on submitting an update on my environment this week. Next week. Yes, do it! Oh hey, Aladdin. Didn't see you sneaking in here. So yeah, the combo of the two just feels a little bit weird. The prop is looking interesting. I have no idea what the prop is though. Am I missing something? Oh, maybe that's like a new update that's not in the scene yet. Yeah, so let's see. Any feedback on the composition? Well, currently this feels like really quickly done because you're kind of cutting off the frame here. Right? So I kind of get the feeling that this is not even composed at this point. I think the issue with this is that even though it's like a really cool, a really interesting shape, right? Like the triangle, it's kind of going to limit you in like what you can do in terms of like your composition. So yeah, that's definitely going to limit you. It's an interesting shape though. Yeah, and the luggage is looking good as a block out. I mean, oh god, we're getting into the block out debate. Oh no, run. If this is like a block out, right? Like I would honestly focus on quicker blockouts and getting all the individual pieces in rather than spending so much time on one thing, right? So that the whole reason is that you can fill out your composition with all the individual elements of your environment, and then you can start detailing them, right? And if you have like the interior open, is that gonna hold something? I'm assuming so, right? Otherwise you wouldn't make the interior. I don't know. Just throwing a bunch of questions your way. Yeah, cool. I think I'm gonna keep it at this, Jacob. Keep it going. I like the designs that you have. I like the inspirations that you're picking from. Very interesting inspirations. Yeah. Keep it up. Oh yeah, you also say, I may also model a slimmer briefcase depending on how cluttered things start to look. Well, that's the thing, right? Like, get those in quick. Like, just add cubes or like really quick models and then get everything in. And then you can tell if it's going to be cluttered or not. And then you know exactly what to make. And then you can start detailing from that point on. So you want to fill it out first. And then you want to start detailing. And honestly, when I say like fill it out first, I'm literally talking about like an hour. Well, not maybe an hour. You know, like you need some time to think about it. But like let's say a day, right? So just making sure that the composition is good, that you have everything you need, and you just do that like really quick, you know? And you can move on to the detailing and take your time. Thanks, Jacob. Looking forward to the next update. Okay, question for everyone in the chat. Who still needs to get their feedback? And who wants to have it first? Type 1 in the chat. It's a race. Let's go. In the meantime... Nice catch, Dennis. Let's see. Henrik. With the church, can I use vertex color to light up some of the pillar stones? Yeah. Yeah. You could. You could use like the amount of channels that you have, right? And then just use it for like whatever you need to use it for. That's totally up to you. Hey Tony, thanks for popping in. Thank you for doing these. They're super helpful and enjoyable. Oh, that's awesome. Hello, Scott. Been a while since you were here. It's good to see you, man. Like to have feedback? The order doesn't matter. It can be the next or the last one. Please and thank you. Okay, so that means we're gonna go with Dennis next, and then we'll do Liz afterwards. Let's see. Oh, sorry, Antonio. Bangladesh? 2 in the morning? Shit. It's awesome. Awesome that you're still here, though. And then this is a question from Gilbert. I don't know if you're still here, Gilbert. What is the future for 3D artists? I think it's gonna include like a lot of modeling. I can be sure of that. That's what the future's looking like for us 3D artists, you know? That's like a guarantee. Same for me, I can wait for the feedback. So... Okay. Then we got Dennis here already on screen. Have a look. Really beautiful update, by the way, Dennis. You've got some really good help from the community as well. Love that. Yeah, it's so atmospheric now. Yeah. It's so good. Also, the 2 images on the bottom, they are like previous iterations, right? So, Dennis is really working on the lighting at this point, and you can really tell. This is really good, Dennis. I like it. I found a good spot for the lighting in the scene with some help from the community. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for helping, by the way. Like, massive shout out to everyone who gave their opinions. That's awesome. Please continue to do that with other people as well. And also remember the advice you gave me earlier. I'm finding that the lighting is proving me quite challenging. That's normal. That's normal, man. It is very common for all of us to get to the point where it is lighting time and we need to take like time to present our stuff. And it is it can be very daunting, you know, because it's new and there's a lot of new things that come with it, right? So yeah, let's have a look here. I'm uncertain about the lighting on the trees in the background. Okay, it kind of gets hazy, right? Is that what you're talking about? In the earlier version on the scene where the sun was shining on the car to the left and the trees in the background looked good and the depth was clearly visible. Let's see. Oh, yeah. I see what you mean. I see what you mean. It's not that bad though, because there is So in here, right, because you have more contrast, think about like the basics, right, like the fundamentals. If you have more contrast, that's gonna pull our eyes away to those locations as well. So I actually think overall that this is a more pleasing image because it forces you to look right here, right? And I think the way that you added your fog to create like a certain depth is actually working pretty well, you know? The thing that could be improved is if we really think about the fundamentals, right? I'll zoom in a little bit for sure. Let's go full screen on this one. So if you really think about the fundamentals, right? The entire screen kind of looks like yellowish, right? So that we need to try and find a way how we can instill it with like a little bit of blue, right? Like just a tad so that we can distinguish it. A good way of doing that is usually I slightly change the color. I slightly change the color from the atmospheric fog to create like a subtle contrast between the two. So I'm gonna write that down for you. But like, it is gonna be tricky, right? Because it is very specific, the stuff that I'm bringing up now. And it's gonna take some trial and error, you know? So, color contrast. I want to break up the orange a little bit. With a little bit of blue. Well, let's see. I wasn't done reading yet, right? So, however, now it appears more noisy and less deep. Hold on. Oh, sorry. Little Nacho was scratching something. Don't do that. Yeah, so tips on how to improve the lighting in the final picture in general, right? Okay, so we kind of talked a little bit about the lighting, right? I think that's good. You can definitely, if you want to play around with things, right? Like one of my favorite things to play around with is depth of field. Having a separation between the different layers of your environment, right? So you would have like some foreground elements, D, and then you have like mid and back, right? So in this case, you could add something in the foreground, like a little bush or something like that, and like have the depth of field like interact with it, right? So that it kind of blurs it out and it creates like a little bit more depth. You could potentially do the same with the background as well, but I wouldn't necessarily do that, right? But it's definitely still like worth looking into depth of field settings of your camera. You can do a lot with that. And then we're just gonna go into like some post-processing effects, right? Basically the finishing touches. So I'm gonna write like a couple down. The vignette is gonna be the first one. It's basically like a black border around like your entire image, right? That's gonna focus like the attention more to like the center. Really quick one. Look into the sharpening filter. That's like r.sharpen something in their console commands. Really useful trick. What you could also look into, and this one is a little bit trickier to find, is I don't know if I brought this up before, but I'm gonna give you the Google search. Probably the best that I can do in this situation. So there are console commands to enable the SSAO, which is screen space ambient occlusion, and it's gonna lift the ambient occlusion in certain cases, that might also be like really interesting to work with. Those are like some things that I use all the time. Well, maybe the last one not really, but the first two definitely. Also, take it into Photoshop. Take it into Photoshop and just play around with it, right? You don't have to do everything inside of Unreal Engine. It's fine to do some posts, like just in Photoshop, you know? Not gonna make that much of a difference. Mario is saying, I think it needs a dash of color on the wagon to draw the eye. Yeah, that's actually a good shout. So something that grabs the attention, right? Let's see. I don't like how the flag is out of frame. Oh, I didn't even pay attention to that. Yeah, it's not too bad, honestly. I don't mind it. I guess this is where it comes down to personal opinion, right? Like, if it was closer to the edge, then I would have said, like, yeah, we need to change something, right? But I don't really mind it too much. Oh, also, tracks. Love it. Got some footprints here as well. Looks awesome. So there is like a real opportunity. Oh, I'm gonna add one more thing. Color correction regions. So these are in Unreal Engine, and they're basically like spheres, right? So and everything inside a sphere you're gonna influence, but you can do like specific color correction. And you can, for example, make like a sphere here, and you could boost the colors of this area just to make it stand out from like all the rest, right? Could be really interesting to play around with. I haven't used this myself, but they could be really valuable for you to play around with. Let's see. Regarding the final presentation, I plan to take one shot of the entire stage and then another one separate, featuring the vegetation and props I created. That's good. I'm considering adding a screenshot of my narrative design board. SSAO is turned off by default by Lumen, right? Yeah. Like screen space ambient occlusion got replaced by Lumen AO. So yeah, your narrative design board, that's an interesting one. It depends on how you present it. Well, the thing is, like the thing that I'm struggling with, right? Like if it isn't clear from the image itself, then people are gonna fault you for adding it, right? Because you're basically adding an explainer, like an explainer for the narrative that you try to establish, right? But like it's our job to do it in a visual way, not with an example, right? So maybe not in that case. Maybe not. And I think you did a good job, right? Like we're getting a story, we're getting some flavor, the battlefield is there, like we're seeing opposing parties. Like it's your take on something, right? That you really love. And I think that's really noticeable. So yeah. I don't think that's necessary. I would honestly just stick with like a very stereotypical, like a couple of shots of the environment and then doing the breakdown, right? Like showing all the foliage, showing the topology, the textures, like all that kind of stuff. Just being as transparent as you can be. Yeah. Dennis, awesome job, buddy. And also, big shout out to like people here, you know, like in the chat supporting each other. That's always awesome to see. It's really cool. If Flamia is saying it's really dry, Medieval is more muddy, I guess it kind of depends on the weather, right? I would... yeah. I don't know about that one. I mean, the thing that I did, like the reason why I made my environment muddy, right, is because I really wanted to play with like stark contrast between like different elements in the scene, right? Yeah. Anyway, thank you for the feedback on the project. No worries, Dennis. Happy to help. Okay, who was next? We had Dennis, and then we had Liz. And who else do we have? We got Bodie after that. And Megal said, modeling and rotating the model endlessly. Hell yeah. Oh, and then Darpan is going to be after Liz. Okay. So, Liz, where are you? You are here. Awesome. Yeah, nice. Okay. Seeing some progression. Like it. Did a good job on like pushing the space around and making it feel like more believable. That's really, really nice already. Yeah, okay, stuff is coming together. Let's see. Can I help with? I'm finishing the blocking stage and I already fixed the perspective issues from last week. I'd like feedback on the lighting and the chairs and anything extra that might look off. Thank you in advance. Yeah, so the lighting is in a really weird spot right now. And it makes me wonder if there is something like fundamentally wrong with the setup of the scene. The reason why I'll say that, right, is like because the white light is coming from a directional light. I'm assuming, right? And if that is the case, it shouldn't come through the ceiling, right? So it should be blocked by the ceiling. Or is that just the skylight? Not really good at lighting? No. Don't worry about it, Liz. I mean, I've been through the same stage, you know. But can you tell me if it's the... what kind of components do you have in your scene right now? Do you have a directional light? Or a skylight? Or both? Because that is what's really confusing me at the moment. Is I'm trying to figure out like where the white or like the neutral light is coming from. You have a skylight. Okay. So a skylight is generally used to create more bounce light. And a directional light. Okay. So because you are doing an interior light, right? Like an interior scene. What I would do is, let me think. Do we need a skylight? Potentially. I would definitely remove the directional light for now, and potentially even the skylight, just for now. I think maybe later on what we could do is add the skylight back in, but for now, just play around with like singular lights that you place everywhere. That should be enough for now. Okay, let's see, because there are some things that we would need to check, right? So first off, like remove directional and skylight, right? Let's start there. Let's make sure that we have full control over our lighting setup, right? And we also do that by adding a post-process volume. And then I'm trying to think about like the specific settings that we have to change. It's been a while since I opened Unreal. So in the post-processing volume, under the auto exposure, maybe chat can help me out with this. So there are settings in the auto exposure that are set to like, I think 0.3 minimum and 8 max or something like that. You basically want to set them both to 1. I know. This is just like a bunch of random numbers that I'm throwing at you. But what this basically does is the auto exposure will compensate for when you're in a dark area, and it will basically try to lighten it up. You can kind of look at it as like mimicking, like you becoming like aware of like a dark space, right? Like if you stand still in like a dark space, like your eyes are going to adjust to the space. What we're trying to do is we're trying to basically minimize the effect of that so that we have specific control over how we're going to light the space, right? Because you might be looking at like a light and it's going to compensate towards one side where we don't necessarily want to have that, right? So yeah, make sure that the auto exposure is turned off. And then we have a bit more control and a bit more stability when it comes to the light that we use. And then at that point, we can start playing around with like individual lights, right? And when you think about lights, a really simple way of thinking about lighting is where would physical lights be coming from, right? So you did a really good job of having lights here, right? That's a great place to place lights. Where... So we have like lamps here, for example. And then we need to find like the main source of where light could also be coming in from, right? I'm going to just quickly scroll up to the concept you have. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to see, right? So I'm going to add that in here. Just gonna move it around here a little bit. Okay, so what we can see is we have like a bunch of specific spotlights, right? Like these lights, there's a light here, a small light here. This is lit up, got the light back here. There's probably like some light coming from here as well, like in the back. But like a directional light, the one that I basically just told you to remove, is basically the white light that's coming in from the back of us. So imagine if we're the camera right now, it's coming in from the back of us and kind of creating like this really diffuse light coming in, right? You can kind of see it by just looking at the shadow that's being cast by the chairs, right? So we know that the light is coming from that direction. There's... Oh, this would be an interesting question. So, I'm not sure about this, right? But if you want to create like a really diffuse light, like one of the interesting ways of doing it is actually shining a light onto a white plane and then making use of like the bounce light that's coming from it. I'm not going to overcomplicate it, right? I'm just going off on a tangent. I would honestly just set like the directional light kind of in like the same sort of like direction as we have like our white light coming in now, and just set it like pretty low to like where you feel that it kind of matches with the scene. Because with that directional light, we're basically just looking at like a very diffuse light that's gonna like lift up the space a little bit, right? Just look at the photography then. What do you mean, Henrik? The photography for like bounce lighting and like studio setups, right? Is that what you're saying? Like using soft boxes and yeah. Yeah, there's probably like simpler ways to do it now in Lumen. Like I know that that's like a very Unreal Engine 4 thing to do when creating like diffuse light for architectural visualization, for example. That's where kind of going back to like Unreal Engine 4 at this point. But yeah, that's what I would say. And then where I was going, I was talking about like the physical lighting is you want to add lights where it kind of makes sense that there would be a light, right? In your case, you're doing a good job at this already. I'm not seeing like random bits floating in the air, but just keep that in mind. Feedback on the lighting and the chairs and anything extra that might look off. Yeah. Chairs are definitely getting there. The only tiny thing that I can bring up to the chairs is that like the edges kind of end where like the top ends as well, right? Whereas in yours, like there's this big gap where like nothing really happens. That's the only thing that I can say about it. I feel like the main shape is there, right? So I think build the front of the bar even if only in block out and push the main light through the windows. Yep, that's a good shout. So you would actually what Mario is saying, right? You would actually build the entrance to the bar that's basically behind you, but build that in like really quick shapes so that you get some sort of like shadowing coming in from like the doorway, you know? The doorway with like the windows. And it's gonna make the light that's coming in like more interesting than just normal light. That's a good shout, Mario. Thank you for that. Cool. Model the entrance for lights. That's a great shout. Yeah, I think honestly that's gonna help you a lot. So the bar creates a shadow. Yeah. So imagine. Okay, we're gonna do a top down drawing again, right? So imagine that this is your space, and this is where we are standing as a person, right? We're kind of looking this direction, for example. What you would then build is kind of do like the front of the house with like, I don't know, pillars, and these things are like windows, right? So you have like the window, you have a doorway, you have another window, and then have like the directional light kind of shine in like this so that you get like shadows being cast from the pillars into the space. And honestly, like these pillars, you don't have to model them completely, right? You just take like a cube, you just stretch it, and that's it. You don't need to texture, you don't need to worry about like how good it looks because you're never gonna see it anyway. So you just really make like the front of the bar as like cubes. Like the only thing that you need from those cubes is that they block light, and that's it. Okay. Nice progress though, Liz. Nice progress. Keep it up. I know that this is a struggle. Lighting is like, we talked about it before. It is like a struggle point for us all, right? It's good that you're doing it really early. Like, you're tackling it on early, which is great. Yeah. Keep doing it. Best of luck. Oh yeah, and of course, for anyone that we've seen before, if there's any more questions, feel free to add them to your thread. Or if I misexplained anything, feel free to reach out in DMs as well. Thank you, Liz. Then I think next up was Bodie, right? Am I remembering that correctly? Yeah. Oh wait, we got contenders. Oh no, it was Darpan. But Bodie was first. Okay, Darpan is gonna go first. Darpan! Oh, you're here already. Hello, Darpan. Where is your little thread? Here we go. A shield shop. Great looking concept, by the way. Great choice. First time posting here as a new member. Welcome to the community. Happy to have you here. I want to make it in 3D and breathe some life into it. Yep, it's awesome. So I started with the blockhouse stage, and the main part where I need feedback would be I was trying to match the camera with the concept. Oh god. Okay. Okay, I appreciate your attention to detail. I really do, right? And this is something that we're gonna discuss with Sunny. Well, we have discussed with Sunny, who's gonna be on the show in a little bit. But you did a great job of matching your setup to the actual concept, right? The thing is, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like, this is good enough. Like, just get started, you know? Like, this is great, you know? Like, I can barely see like any issues with it, right? Like, there's like, oh, the roof is like a little bit overhanging. No one's gonna care about that, you know? The dedication that you're showing to like copying the reference is already good enough. So it's awesome, man. Let's see. I tried F-Spy. Yeah, you're going further than I ever did. So it would be great if you can give some tips on camera positioning and matching the perspective. Yeah, I would honestly move on. That would be my advice. Because, so here's the thing, right? Like, we all have like this perfectionist angle to us, but it can easily destroy our motivation. So we kind of have to tackle it from the beginning that, what is it like this? I keep saying it, but like the perfection is like the enemy of the good, right? So usually people keep chasing perfection, but they never get it, that they forget that they can just like post something that's good, right? I don't want you to end up in that trap. So I would say keep moving on and keep working on the concept, right? Doesn't have to be perfect. Just has to be good enough. Because honestly, I'll say something else, right? People are not gonna have these side by side. And if I open this one first, and then I go to another tab and I see this one, I wouldn't notice any difference. Like, it's the same. Okay, I understand, as it takes too much time to match the camera. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're being so dedicated with it as well, right? Of course it takes a lot of time. But you got close enough. So camera matching is great. But time to move on. Because I'll let you in on another secret, right? When working in games, you are not in control of the camera. The player is. So, at best, this is gonna be like 1/60th of a frame that they're gonna see, right? Let's see. So, the left part of the concept is not clear enough. So I don't know what I should model at the part of the building. I want to show what part also... Oh, that part also in the render. Is this the kind of a situation? How would you approach this kind of concept? Aha! This is where we earn our bread and butter as environment artists. Because this is a very common situation. So oftentimes we get a concept, but it's not complete. So what we have to do is kind of take what the concept has given us and then imagine what it looks like in the missing pieces. So, and the way that we do that is, okay, you have the front of the shop, right? And you're trying to imagine what is at the back of it. So we have to ask some questions to kind of get to the answers, right? So the back of the shop is missing. from the concept. We're gonna ask some questions. First question here would probably be, what does a shop look like? Right? What does like an actual shop in real life look like? Sounds like a silly question, right? But if you go to like any kind of shop, let's say this is a shop that has like a shop front, right? So we have like the frontal part, and then we have like the place where the people actually live, right? So it's also like a family building. So we have the shop itself, and then we have the family space. And then there's probably, I don't know, this is like a little bit of storage. If it's in America, we need 20 parking spaces. Only 20? So yeah, we kind of have like this family building that's kind of attached to the shop, right? But let's imagine that we're only focusing on the shop itself. Usually what happens on the shop is that there is going to be like a back side of the shop where they can throw the garbage, right? Very common to just have like the back space, because you don't want to have like garbage collecting in like the front of the shop. So what they do is they put it at the back of the space, right? Let's see. So we have, let's imagine this is our little building from the top, right? And then we have our little storage space, like this is the shop itself. And you could almost have like a section where this is like, oh my god, waste. And then maybe there's like a little water well, right? Because this family is trying to be self-contained. I have like a water well in the back, maybe a little bit further from the building. Who knows? But maybe there's also, yeah, what else could we add? You know, so we have like the waste, we kind of have like the water, and then maybe this side is just like a space where they just have like a little garden or something like that, right? Maybe let's move some of these components around. So this is like a little shed now. We leveled up the waste area to a shed, and then this is like a little garden. And then this is where there's like a just like little waste area, right? So this is the thing, like I kind of try to think about it logically, and the garden comes from so okay, wait, let's take a step back. Let's take it step by step. What does a shop look like, right? We have the shop front, but we also need a space where there's gonna be like some waste, or maybe even like deliveries, right? Where they take in things. Oh, this is a shield shop. This is a shield shop. Where do they make the shields? Right? There needs to be a space there. So where do they make the shields? You could have like deliveries coming in of like raw ore. So you could have like a pile of just like iron ore, like at the back of it. And then they take it in, they smelt it, and then they turn it into shields, right? So yeah. And then you could expand on this, and that's the area that I did here, right? It's like, who owns the shop? But this could be anything, right? You can make up anything. So I kind of went with like humans that have like a passion for gardening, right? And that's what they do as a hobby, and they run a shield shop in their spare time. But like, well, the shield shop is their main income, but they also do a gardening on the side so that they can like self-sustain, right? That's one story. However, you could also be like, hey, this is a shop run by dwarves, and they have like a freaking mine in their background. You know? It changes it completely. So that's why this is important. Who owns the shop? It can be humans, dwarf, like anything, right? But from that choice is gonna evolve like a whole new timeline. So think about those things as well. Can you give me some suggestions for the composition? Like, how can I apply the leading the eye concept from the environment art tip book? Oh, awesome! Thank you for the mention. So you gotta think for your composition. It's gonna get really messy. So for your composition, you kind of want to lead people to this section, right? In the concept, it has a lot of stuff attached to it, so it's going to automatically be a focal point compared to the rest. However, if you want to lead lines to it, you kind of have to work with like a road network or something like that, right? So that you can lead people to it. You could have like little road network going to it. You could even have like, you know, a section here. And a road network goes off into the distance. Right, but you kind of want to give an indication. And you see that I'm kind of using the road as like a push towards like the building, right? Just to like slightly push you towards it. What you could also do is have the terrain then work together with the road as well. Where you could imagine yourself standing on like a hill looking down on the shop, and the road is kind of taking you towards the shop, right? So it doesn't have to be complex. I don't know how far you want to take this apart from just the building, right? If you just want to do the building by itself without any terrain, that would be great. But then you don't have to like overcomplicate it with like a lot of these lines, because it's going to be the only thing that's going to be important in the frame, right? You can use a lot of leading lines, right? So we talked about roads. What about fences? You could use nature in the foreground. You could use terrain. These are all tools that we can use, right? And I'm just spitballing like a couple of them. There's thousands, right? You're just gonna make sure that they kind of fit into like the fantasy of the world. And then you're good. I will also make some terrain and some foliage also to blend it with the environment. Okay. Be careful with that. I also have no clue what your skill level is, right? So I'm kind of going on like an assumption here. Be careful with that if it's like one of your first couple of environments, because I was kind of hesitant on terrain itself, because for terrain to look good, you have to do like lots of layers there. And if you then want to add foliage to it too, that's like a whole different thing. What I would suggest, right, is I'm not going to stop you from doing the terrain and the foliage, but what I would suggest is do the building first, finish that completely, and then if you still want to do those things that you have in mind now, do them at that point. Because what you could do, and would work really nicely, is just doing the same thing as in the concept, right? Where you just have like a really cute, like cut out little piece of terrain that just has like little bits of fluffy grass, and grass is easy to make, right? Just other bits of foliage aren't. That would be my suggestion. That is what I often call my save point strategy, right? Is you want to make sure that I finish the building first. Cool. If I then want to keep working on it, I can, but I know that I have the save point of like the building, right? And I can put that on my portfolio if I wanted to. Yeah, start from there. And then if you still want to work on it, then you can still do that, right? Let's see. I missed anything? I've attached an orthographic view as well, but it's not very clear. That is only a line drawing. Yeah. Hi, Hith. Hello. I was a bit late and I missed my feedback, but thank you so much for the suggestions. Mine was a crazy cute maid cafe interior. Awesome. Yeah, that looked really cute. You know, really interesting concept that you draw as well. So I'm really keen to see how that's going to develop. Darpan is saying, okay, I understand. Yeah, thank you so much for posting your work, Darpan. Thank you so much. Best of luck. This is going to be awesome. You picked a great concept to work from. I really like this concept. And you nailed the proportions already. So, yeah. It's going to come down to like how you approach this, right? I'm honestly like really excited to see what's going to come out of this. Oh, sorry, Mario. In the references there, in the foreground frame is front lit with a blue light, which indicates it's bounce light from the sky. You need to balance the skylight against the practical lights in the scene. Oh, shit. Sorry, that was about the previous one. There might be animals that live underneath. Oh, yeah. Like on the side? Could be. Makes sense, right? It could be storage, it could be animals, it could be a pasture. Oh my god, you can do so much with this environment. That's what I love, right? Like, also one thing that I want to shine a light on is because we're talking about like translating concepts, right? So in the industry, what is oftentimes the case is that you might be asked to work on something like one-on-one, right? Which basically means you have to translate this literally into the game. But I will say in 99% of the other cases, you will be actually adding your own influences into those concepts, right? So as you translate them into 3D, things are going to change, things are going to evolve, and you're going to work together with the concept artist to take it to the next level, together with your ideas. So, yeah. That's why I kind of... You can take this as like a base, right? But it would be really cool to see what you do with the parts that are missing. Because that's where you have your creative freedom. You can exercise it. Awesome. Thank you so much, Darpan. And again, welcome to the community. What's next? I keep losing track. We had one more person flagging up, right? Yes, it was Darpan. And then Bodie. That's right. Bodie. Coming in with a really interesting scene already, Bodie. I like it. Let's have a look. Where's your post? Watchtower. Cool. The scene is based on Harry Platt's Watchtower outpost. Awesome. Shout out to Harry Platt. I initially started this project to learn how to make tileable textures and trim sheets, and also developed into learning speed tree. Okay, you're taking on some additional things, but you're sticking to bushes by the looks of it. So that's gonna be fine. Would be nice to get some feedback on the textures on the tower. Is it too noisy with the variations on the stones? Not really. From the looks of it, we'll dive into it in a bit. The wood trim and the composition. The grass texture is a placeholder, the rocks are from Quixel, and the characters are from Big, Medium, Small. Yes, I use the same characters, they're good. Hey, hi Sonny. It's nice to see a live feedback from your live stream. Oh, Bodie is saying the bush was just a test and it failed. Hey man, you gotta take the wins, you know? Like it's looking decent. It can be improved for sure, but it's a good starting point. Also at a distance, you know, well, who's gonna see? But let's go to your questions though. So, textures on the tower. Is it too noisy? I don't think so, honestly. I don't mind them. Kind of having a look at like the tidables here. Because usually you have to be really careful with these kind of cracks, right? Like these kind of cracks, like they can be like very repetitive, like really quickly. But I don't think that's the case on your end, so that's good. Oh, okay. We're gonna talk about that damage in just a second. No, I think overall the textures are looking really good. The only thing... This is not about the textures, right? But you gotta... When you're blending these two things together, right? It's always interesting to see how this would actually be built up in real life, right? Because normally what you would have in real life is where you have like a bigger stone and then like all the other ones are kind of like smushed against it, right? So you need to try and sort of replicate that with like some smart UVing and seeing how you can like cut up like your texture, right? To kind of make the same sort of sense. Or another way around could be that you like change the scale of these guys to match the scale of the smaller ones. But then you're not going to get that chunky effect on the sides, right? So... see what you mean. I like what you're doing with the combination though. Looks really nice. See, this stuff works really well because I cannot see like the difference between where the tidable ends and where that bit of geometry begins, right? And that's done really well. I like that you have like subtle shifts in the silhouette here. Starting to look really good. Hello? Oh, I lost control for a second. Let's see. So, let's keep on checking your questions, right? So, the texture noise is doable. I honestly don't think it's that big of an issue. It actually is quite nice. It's no extra part at that part. Oh, you're just cutting around the tidable? Manipulated some edges? Yeah. That works as well. Either or works great, right? Like, that's a great technique as well. So, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so the noise or like the difference in the colors on the texture, right? Is what just works really well because it kind of gives a feel of like, yo, they had to use like local resources, and usually what that means is that you cannot pick and choose what color you want from your stones, right? So that's why I like it. And I also kind of like it that it sort of matches with the terrain underneath. It's just like a really neat additional thing. The wooden trim and the composition. Okay. Oh, first off, we're gonna talk about this one, right? So, edge damage. What you are gonna have to do in this case is you're gonna have to do the trick that you basically did before, but just the opposite way, right? So what that means is that instead of adding a brick, you're gonna cut out like a brick or like a brick or two, right? To basically make the silhouette broken, because this is the sort of damage that looks like plaster damage, and it doesn't really fit with like the brickwork underneath, you know, because it doesn't take up like the brick lines that you would normally see. But it kind of just feels like a little bit out of place at this point. So we need to match that with the bricks. Yeah, you know what you're doing with that because you've already did it so good on the other part, so you just need to flip it on its head, basically. It's starting to look cool. Got the wooden trim here. Where's that used? Oh, and all this stuff, right? Yep. It's looking cool. The only thing you have to watch out for is this edge damage, right? Because that's going to be like really noticeable if it comes up like a couple times. So what I would rather do is have it just as like a normal thing and then use like a little cutout here. That's what I do in my trim sheet, right? I kind of use, it seems like you're sort of using the same template. So what I would do is I would just take like a random section like this, go into Photoshop or whatever, and I would basically paint like my own alpha mask that kind of looks like it's broken. And then I have like a decal that I can just like add on top of like bits of wood where I want it to look like broken or like splintered. Right, so it's basically just really simple. It's basically translating this to like a separate piece. Gives you more flexibility. Yep, you do. That's great. That's great. Yeah, looks good. Looks good. And then, you know, when you got a trim sheet like this, it comes down to the geometry, right? Basically the same sort of things that you're doing on the tower itself. You want to do that on the assets that are made with the trim sheet as well, right? So really making them like wonky and crooked and all that kind of stuff. That's looking good. Finally, the composition. Composition is pretty straightforward. I would honestly... yeah, look at what they're doing here. Right? And it seems like you took some inspiration. I think it's mostly based on this guy right here, right? Yeah, this one is interesting. Because you kind of have like this bowl shape and then this stark contrast. I feel like this thing is kind of just like conflicting here. And then like you got the shape of the clouds, which is kind of like pointing you sort of towards this guy. That could work. I am more a fan of... are these different? No, they're the same, right? Switch around a little bit. I'm a bigger fan of a composition that is like a bit more spread out, right? So stuff like this. Rule of thirds. Right? Like a clear relationship here. That's up to you. I think this can also work. What I would try to do in that case, because there's like really creative ways that you can like make this more interesting than it already is, right? I would put less emphasis on the guy over here, because you also have like a different kind of guy, so it's going to work out. Less emphasis on the smoke, and then maybe try to do something with like a more interesting trail going to the building, so that it's not just straight, but that there's actually some sort of movement to the trail. And maybe a little bits of verticality, right? And then you can add like little bits of fencing in the foreground that kind of lead you towards like the tower. Hope that makes sense. Just a bunch of scribbles over here. But yeah, like if you want to keep something like this, what I would do is basically pull the camera back a bit. And then see if you can make like a more interesting road work. And then you could play around with like a bunch of fences, right? Just add some foreground elements as well. Something like that. Maybe swing this curve around like a little bit more. You have the road coming here. Yep. Something like that. Really rough draft, but it's worth playing around with, right? Yeah. Making the leading towards it like a little bit more interesting rather than just like a straight road. Yeah, but it's also your choice, right, Bodie? Like, you've done such a great job with your previous work, so I'm gonna add it as a suggestion. Play around with it, but if you really don't like it, trust your gut, right? It's still your work in the end. Because I feel like this sort of stuff becomes more personal. Making the road more interesting. Yeah, that's what I would do. That is what I would do. And then potentially pushing the frame as well. Right, so that the frame like ends around this point and extends a little bit more around this point. Gives you like a little bit more free space. Like, it kind of pushes it more into like this sort of direction. Right, where you have like the rule of thirds happening, and then you kind of have like the opportunity to do more with a path that kind of swings around towards it, right, rather than just having it straight. Not happy with the one, that's why I'm asking. So the suggestions, no worries, happy to help. Thank you so much for posting your work, Bodie. I'm gonna, yeah, so this would basically be like the line where it ends, roughly, right? That you can extend your frame this way. Play around with it. Have fun with it. See what works. And thank you so much for posting your work, buddy. I appreciate it. Couple more to go. Let's see. Okay, I think Nathaniel, we're gonna go here because I think Nathaniel's gonna be like a pretty short one. If anyone is seeing this, does this environment look like a laboratory? Do I need more props and set dressing to make it look more like a lab? I don't think so, honestly. Like, it looks really good at the moment. You've got like really nice big shapes going on. Right, so you got like big egg containers, which is like very stereotypical, you know, like testing laboratory. Can you enable automatic subtitles for your live streams? I've seen it enabled before, but for some reason it was turned off. Oh, interesting. I didn't know that I had control over that. I will check that after the stream. So for the next one, potentially. Actually, let's have a quick look. Let's have a quick look. Here's my dashboard. Okay, no. I'll have to have a look later at that. Thank you for the suggestion, though. So, we got the big shapes. We got the big lab shapes, which is really cool. Do I need more props and set dressing to make it look more like a lab? No, I don't really think so. If you really want to push it further, like, you could ask a couple of questions, right? I think the first one would be, what are they testing? Right? Like, maybe that's just the main one. Like, what are they testing and why? Right? And if you have the answer to that question, that's gonna give you a ton of inspiration for props. Because let's say, oh, they're trying to clone humans, right? Okay, cool. How do they know if they're successful, right? Do they take them out? Like, do they have like a training facility for young people? Or is it literally just like, oh, we're trying to see, we had like, I don't know, run some experiments, we ended up with aliens, and now we're gonna see what kind of material they're made from, right? So there's probably gonna be like a different thing happening there compared to if you want to raise them, right? Just really big stuff. I'm also seeing this shimmering artifact on my metal and reflective surfaces. Anyone know what the cause of it is? I think that's Lumen acting up. It might be... I honestly have no idea. Where I would look first is scalability settings. Oh my god. Yeah. Probably has something with Lumen. I'm honestly not sure. So I'm not going to make any more assumptions. It has something to do with Lumen. It is like a very common thing. So I'm assuming if you just look it up that you're going to find like a bunch of results. Because I can keep guessing, right? But it's probably way easier to just do like a quick Google search on that. It has something to do with Lumen. I like the way that it responds to metals. Because yeah, you get that graininess. That's why I was saying the scalability settings, because maybe... No. What it could also be is FSR up-resing your screen resolution. Okay, so I'm gonna add that here as well. Because what has happened now, because they have Unreal Engine has their own like upsampling, right? That's happening. So what it did is by default, and I think it might even depend on like your graphical settings, it will turn your screen resolution to like 76%, and then basically like up-res it to 100 again. But in your screen percentage, oh sorry, not screen resolution. It will still say 76%. 67. So have a look at that without to 100, see if it changed anything. And if it didn't, then it might be Lumen that you need to have a look at. Yeah, looking really interesting so far, Nathaniel. Great job. Keep it up. And we're gonna go to Megal. Megal over here, working away on his apartment. As feedback, I would like some of your thoughts on the damaged walls and the whole, both in terms of texturing and modeling. And then also on the props, if they make sense. Okay, let's have a look at the props first. The props down here look really nice. They look really good. I like the way where that is going, right? There's some interesting opportunities with like flyers on the wall, right? Where you could have them make statements on the window. You have these eviction notices, which are really interesting, but they're just like a little bit flat at the moment, right? So... So the paper on the wall just really flat. What you need to do there is just add like a little bit of geometry, right? Like model in the wrinkles and just make it crumple a little bit. Then also make sure that we know how they're attached to the wall, right? Like, do we use like little bits of like tape? Like, are they pinned in the wall? Like, what's happening there? So how are they attached? Yeah, but these guys down here, nice. I like where that is going. You can do a lot with this empty space down here as well, right? You could have like stuff stacked up there. Now we get to the wall. What I'm gonna say immediately is we need to have a look at references more. And specifically, how these buildings were built. What is the layering of it, right? Because I'm seeing some wood and I'm seeing plaster on the outside, but it's not really convincing yet, right? And they're all gonna have like a different response to how they're broken. So for example, if you're gonna have, let's see, so if you're gonna have the wood, right, which is like a really nice touch, it's a corner piece, so that usually means that there's going to be a pillar there, right? So, let's see. We're probably going to have like a splintered pillar that's just coming out, like if it's broken like that, right? And then all these like individual planks make them look like they're individual, right? Like really, really play around with like the silhouette of it. Oh, I thought so. Yeah, there is like a little bit of a pillar. Okay. I'm gonna take it one step further though, because I'm gonna ask a question again, right? So what did that damage? Like, what was the cause of that damage? Because this looks like massive amount of damage, right? Like, it's a corner of a building. Like, no one's just gonna smack a hole into that. Okay. I was gonna add a sledgehammer. Okay, why would the people that are getting evicted but don't want to get evicted smash their own building? Right? Because if they're in protest, like demolishing their own building, then I, as like a construction company, would just wait. You know? Also, it's going to be quite confusing, right? Because maybe what you were trying to do is you were trying to give the indication that the construction company already did some work on it, but that's going to be really confusing. That's going to be really specific, and that's not going to come over well. So I think what you could do, and what could be like a really nice spin on this, is if you really lean into the old, decrepit style of building, right? Where this is almost like just like natural decay from like over the years being under control of like people that don't give a shit about this building, right? But now that they're getting evicted, they do. So you could almost make it like a, I don't know, like a squatter's den or like a drug house or something like that, right? Sort of like not showcasing that it's like full of people who use drugs, but just showcasing that the amount of decay and the lack of care for the building could indicate that those people were living there. If that makes sense. I was thinking just an old cheap home with a landlord that doesn't care. Yeah, I mean, technically the end result is always going to be the same, right? If you're going to go that route, which is what I would recommend, is you have to spread the damage a little bit more. was gonna do broken near the window, but I have a brick behind since it's the interior. Yeah, I would honestly like open up this space like way more, you know? And almost like you could have like the planks sticking out here. So maybe like plank here, and then this is the part where it kind of goes back into itself and it's just like exposed plaster, but you see like the, let's see. Right, and really showcasing like all the layers that are like behind this. And then just really working with it, right? Like really finding like a nice combination of like the textures and the model like working together to make it look and feel like this is a home that hasn't seen like a good day in its life, you know? And then same with the building, like you were saying, you just expose the brick. It's great. But yeah. You need to spread the destruction a little bit more. Because that idea that you had of like the broken edge near the window, that's great. Right? Because that's the focal point. And like the stuff that I added here is not going to be visible from this side, right? So we kind of have to add stuff here as well. Right? But it's like really showcasing like the different layers of the building. Because this almost looks like it looks too specific, right? It looks too specific for a building that's basically falling apart. Yeah. And that's why I'm saying references, right? I'm imagining, like I've watched too many videos of like old abandoned buildings. So I've kind of seen like the stereotypical like old American building, like the old American institutions, right? Where they have like brick on the outside, but like the inside is basically just like wooden core, and then like the plaster on the outside, and then they just like slap some wallpaper on top of it, right? Like that sort of stuff. There's really cool references. But yeah. Oh yeah. Quick Googling doesn't count as referencing, Megal. Come on. Take your time. I want to see like an extensive reference sheet. Because honestly, like I know that it's weird, right? Or not weird, like it's annoying. Like I always felt in the beginning like, oh my god, like, just get the hell out of here with your stupid references, right? But it's not there to help someone else, it's to help you understand what you're building. And that's a click that I never really made until I started using references like voluntarily, right? Because I realized that I lacked an understanding of what I was trying to build, and references are guidance when it comes to that. So yeah, lean on them, right? Like whenever you think like, this is not feeling right, that's like an indication that you need to do like a little bit more referencing. And this stuff is gonna look really good. Yeah. Best of luck, Megal. Best of luck. So how does the plaster look currently? References. It doesn't feel like plaster at the moment. It feels more like shoot, like cement, like rough cement or something like that. Concrete, I guess. Not cement. That's what it feels like at the moment. And it's like partially the color, but also like the texture on it as well. Yeah. That's my instinct, right? That's what my instinct says right now. It doesn't look like plaster. It feels more like a concrete type of material. Okay, Megal. Best of luck. Hunt for those references. Pay attention to it. Yeah, look for like a bunch of really interesting things that can help you grow. Or like make better walls in this case. Yeah, but the rest of it is looking cool though. I like the posters, right? Oh, look nice. So the feedback again. No worries. Go into designer and start making my own. Do it. Do it. Do it. Okay. Couple more here. We got Sunny. Archive? Hello, Jacob. What is that? Asterix archive. Okay, Sunny. Couple more to go. Let's see. Oop, CD above? Wait, did I miss it? Huh? It's not showing anything for me, like above that from you. Weird. Okay. Oh. Huh? That's weird. Yeah, it's also not showing up in like the chat on screen, so weird. That is strange, sorry. No worries, no worries. Weird stuff happens sometimes here. Okay, so, Sunny. Straight off the bat. This is scary. 100% scary. The scope that you have envisioned. Oh, no, Alan. No, I skipped your feedback because you didn't ask any. Right? You were just like, hey, we're gonna post this. I asked you to be specific, Alan. Come on. Funny, yes. So, I'm scared when I see this. You've got like a really cool plan for it, right? But it is so scary, the scope and the scale of it. Let's dive into what you were saying before, though. So, hoping to receive feedback so I can improve the layout and the proportions because I'm not really good at this. Even though I tried to show the 1/3 layout, I still feel like it wasn't right. In addition, I don't know if the ratio between castles, bridges, and buildings and the people is appropriate or not. Wait, what? Okay, I don't really follow what you mean by that, because you're working from a concept, right? So you're not going to change the amount of bridges and all the other stuff anymore, right? I'm confused here. I decided that my project was walkable in third person in Unreal, so I tried to level design each area where the character could walk. I've shown this in the image below. Yeah, so that's like the walkable areas over here, right? I would not do this. Just straight up, Sunny, like this is a crazy amount of work that you're gonna have to put in. And even if you're gonna be smart, right? It's gonna be, let's see, you had an original timeline, right? What was your original timeline? So 3 to 4 months. Even working on like a single perspective, right? Like your main perspective, getting all this stuff done and looking really nice in 3 to 4 months is going to be really interesting. It's going to be very difficult already to get it to like a really high quality, right? With also all like the small prompts that you need to make it feel like a market, right? And all made it yourself, right? So I want to be really careful here that like 3 to 4 months for a fully walkable city. I mean, it is a city at this point, right? Like if you're making these things, like that is a lot. Wait, have a look. So That means that, like, this stuff, that stuff needs to be completely, well, in the gate as well, right? So, like, that stuff over here as well. That is crazy. Because the issue there is, right, Sonny, is that if you're going to make it walkable, then what you're going to have to do is make sure that those areas look good in 360. I plan to spend about 6 months on this whole process full time, about 8 hours a day. It's obscured by this little heart thing. 8 hours a day. Even then, it is really ambitious, and yeah, I think it is over ambitious. Like, there's a lot of shortcuts that you can do, right? And like, one of the major shortcuts that we were going into is that I assumed that you were gonna work with like one camera standpoint. And that means that you can do like a lot of trickery, right? Because at a certain point, it doesn't matter what's going to be in a distance as long as it looks like it is something. However, if you want to get to, a state where like you can walk around and everything is properly set dressed, everything makes sense, everything has like an identity, all that kind of stuff, that is nuts. However, the way that I would approach this, right? Because I also don't want to say like, no, you shouldn't do this, like you should stop immediately, is I don't know if you were here before, but like I have this concept which I call like working towards a save point. What I would do is I would work purely towards this. Only this, right? Only this viewpoint. Make it look as good as possible. And then, if you still want to go after it, what you then need to do is you just need to do like a whole bunch of set dressing, right? Because you have most of the assets already. You just have to set dress them, or like place them in the world. Oh shit. Oh, my pen. You just have to place them in the world for it to make sense, right? So if you're at that stage, it becomes easier. Becomes easier. Would it be alright if I write a few things we could use feedback on? No, sorry, Adam. Like, I'm short on time today. Got like a whole bunch of people already. So, sorry. But yeah. But what I would do is, let's see. So even if it is like 6 months, right? It's still crazy. Fully walkable city. This means 360, right? We're talking about like 360 views. So that means that if you are, let's say, standing here, right? I'm a guy standing here and I'm looking that way. That means that I need to make like the background terrain here as well. Right? You see what the issue is? Like, instead of like focusing on like one angle, now we're adding 360 to the mix and we need to flesh out everything. So, back to save points. What I would do is I'm gonna even I would do there's another issue that I'm gonna bring up is you're working with different zones as well, right? So you have zone 1, which is a garden, zone 2, which is a castle, and zone 3, which is a market. Those 3 areas are gonna need different textures, different assets to feel different, right? That's gonna be a huge task as well, to make those feel different too. Like I said before, you can get away with like a lot of things because you're not looking at it from close up, right? So the castle, you could get away with like relatively simple stuff, like just a couple of tidables and you could make a whole castle. That's not what I'm worried about. It's only when you get close, you can't get away with just using a tidable or stuff anymore. You need to pay attention to like all the details you have. You need to have it set dressed, all that kind of stuff, right? So Save points. This is where it gets tricky, right? Because with the different areas, it becomes difficult to split them up and still have them cohesively. Okay, so I'm gonna make it really simple. One camera with a focus on the market. Once the market is done, you move on to castle. Once the castle is done, you move on to the garden. Right? Once all of this is done, then we're thinking about making the walkable. Because that is gonna mean that we have to do like I said before, like a lot of set dressing, right? A lot of set dressing, and then we're gonna have to make everything cohesive. We can actually walk around in it, and we actually need to pay attention to like the scale and all that stuff, right? Maybe I was dreaming a little bit too big. Look, I get it, you know? Like, and I love the ambition. You just have to build up towards it. And this is a way that you can do that, right? Like, by using the save point technique, is you just like build the market first. If the market is done, you could potentially put that on your portfolio, right? By just placing the camera somewhere different, you have like a bunch of assets that are like looking really nice. You could make it into something. So that's what I mean, right? Like at any stage here, like here, 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 or here, if you ever get tired, you can just say like, hey, I have the market and the castle. And then the back end, I just make that out of the assets that I've made for the market. And then you're just trying to be effective, right? Or you just cut it out and you add the mountain closer or whatever, right? There's creative solutions to problems like this. Yeah, that's a technique that you could use. Do you think my main camera ratio is okay? I'm a bit worried about the ratio between the building and the houses and the bridges. Yeah, looks cool, looks epic. You followed the proportions from the concept, right? So they look epic, as in the concept. I mean, you were so good at replicating the concept, right? So I have no worries about like the proportions that you have right now. Yeah, proportions look epic. They look good. Yeah. Let's see. Was there anything else? Would also like to receive feedback on my current level design. I'm not really going to do that. Like, it basically goes in line to what we were saying before, right? I would not do that yet. After completing the block out, I want to spend some time learning and doing modular work. The textile density I want to use is 1024 with a texture of 1024. Yeah, the texture doesn't really matter, right? Like, the texture depends on the size of the object at that point. But 1024 per meter is good. Also, with a textile density of 1024, will there be a feeling of repetition due to tiling textures? Could I improve that in Unreal? Oh, yeah. There's like a bunch of things that you can do. So this is also a thing, right? Like the scale and the scope of this is going to depend on your technical ability to mask a lot of these things that you're already asking questions about. So it's great that you realize these things, right? But you're going to encounter like a lot of technical hurdles or like things that you need to fix in like a creative way, or like with materials, or I don't know, whatever you need to fix it with, right? But there are definitely ways. So one of the things is vertex paint. Very common. That allows you to blend multiple materials. It's going to be really useful for anything that you're going to be doing, because it basically just allows you to blend multiple tilables by just painting on top of them. So that's a technique that I would look into. I'm gonna keep it at that for now. But that is like a really basic technique that's gonna offer you like a lot of flexibility. So definitely look into vertex painting. Yeah. Okay, Sonny. Hope that helped. I know that I'm being really strict here, but we gotta dial in those expectations so that we can make a kick-ass portfolio piece, you know? That's what we're aiming for. We want to make a finished portfolio piece. Okay. I decided to definitely wake up early to listen to your feedback. Oh, dude, thanks so much. 4 a.m? Go back to sleep. Thank you so much for getting up so early, Sonny. Oh, that's awesome. No, best of luck, Sonny. I know that sometimes it's like pretty blunt, right? And that I'm trying to keep it like straight. But yeah. I think you have something here, right? Don't get me wrong. Like, I think you picked like a really interesting concept. We just have to make sure that you're gonna get to the finish line. Thank you so much for posting it. 2 more. I think we're gonna have to speed up a little bit. So we got Alex here. Oh, Alex, you were saying that you were feeling sick, so you couldn't update, right? Use some general feedback. Question about the mirrors and the windows. Yeah, I'm not really gonna... Okay, I'm gonna give maybe like a couple of quick things that I notice. But about the windows? So these windows, right? They look good. So what you could do here, right, is instead of having like these slats, you could have like a slat that's like slightly open, maybe. What usually happens... I mean, you could also just like, you know... Also cover it up with curtains if you wanted to. It just depends on what you want to do with it, right? Like if you feel like this is kind of like not working, what you could do is just like cover it up in curtains instead. Just have the curtains there. It could also work. So windows, curtains, or more variation in the slats, right? Is the texture above the window distorted? Yeah. Alex is currently working on the UV mapping, so there's going to be some issues there. But Alex is fully aware of that. Good eye though. Good eye though, Megal. Yeah, that's the way that I would play it. It basically just depends on... it basically just depends on what you want to do with it, right? Like what kind of creative solution works the best for your situation. Yeah, because you definitely want some sort of blackout thing, right? Because this is like a what was it? Like a meeting point for supernatural hunters. So you gotta have some sort of like blackout mechanism. I'm trying to find a base that works, but I'm not finding anything I like. Well, curtains make sense. Yeah, I think curtains are like very common, right? Because like these sort of blinds, they're like more of a modern solution, and I feel like it doesn't really work well when it comes to these type of windows, right? Because usually you would have these sort of blinds like in offices, right? On the interior. And Yeah. So you just have to make sure, and it kind of comes down to the same thing, right? Like it's references. What do they say? Like what kind of windows? Like how do they blind, or like how do they close those kind of windows, right? It's gonna be important here. Because like a curtain rod is like the first thing that I can come up with, because it is like more traditional, right? Just a mismatch currently. I don't know. Yeah, these, I made them too blurry. My bad. Trigger warning references. It's not a trigger warning, you know? I mean, yeah, I mean, if you followed my stream, you know how gigantic my reference library is, right? Or like, well, not my reference library, just my references for my medieval project. Gigantic by itself. So yeah, I would definitely trust the references. Find something that is like age appropriate or like timeline appropriate to what you're trying to establish here, right? And then the question about the windows. So I'm unsure about what to do about the mirrors since I don't find a way to make them work with Lumen. I'm not sure. Why do you want to... What is missing with them in Lumen? Because you got mirrors now, right? I'm not sure what the issue is here. I mean, it's been a while since I tried to create mirrors. There's like a bunch of things that you need to enable, right? Like one of them is like high resolution screenshots. But the reflection is very bad. Yeah, so in your project settings, there is a checkbox where you can tick high resolution reflections. That is usually used for things like architectural visualization, but that's probably what you want to be using. I think it is in project settings. High resolution reflections. Other than that, I don't think I can be of help because I'm assuming that you already have like a planar reflection set up, right? I don't even know that works with Lumen or if that's like a Unreal Engine 4 thing. Glad you're enjoying it, Megal. That's also one thing that I would look into, but I'm not sure if that works or not with Lumen. Doesn't work with Lumen? Okay, so that's off the table. Otherwise, I don't know. I'm gonna give you like another suggestion, the opposite way. What if you purposefully reduce the reflectivity of the mirrors? Like imagine like look at old mirrors and they didn't have perfect reflections. They had like very noisy and like diffuse reflections, especially once they're like a little bit older. So that could be like a creative solution. Plus, just straight up, like really reflective surfaces always look really weird. It's always nice that they have something of a texture to them. That would be something to look up on Google. One thing, didn't think about that, but that probably would make sense. Yeah, well, it kind of depends on your timeline, right? Like if it is current day, it would probably be like a little bit more shinier than if it was like an old mirror from back in the day, if that makes sense. Be careful about these floorboards. Right? I'm just gonna throw that out there. The treatment, right? Like the roughness variation on them looks really nice. It's just usually you have like a certain breakup, right? Like the planks are usually like interlocked instead of just like all the same length. Cool though. I like the little story that you have going on. I really enjoy that story. It's gonna be really interesting how you're gonna portray that, right? Yeah, I'm curious. Curious what you're gonna do with it. One thing I noticed is that it doesn't look like any of the contact cast shadows on certain objects. Not sure why. That might just be because the shadows are disabled on certain lights. So you have to. That might be like an optimization thing currently, because it might be a heavy scene with all the lights. Yeah. Good catch though, Red. Good catch. You will be surprised how often this happens in games, by the way. Like if you really pay attention to it, like you see it a lot in games where like it doesn't cast shadows. It's really interesting. Yeah, cool. Oh, Lumen is blowing up for some reason. Lumen by itself is like very intensive. Also, if you wanna pay attention, if you want to make sure that you need to optimize your lights a little bit, right? Because a lot of the issues are coming from when you have multiple lights in your scene, and the radius like overlaps between all of them. Like it's basically gonna like exponentially like increase the costs of all your lights whenever they have overlap, which is like a huge performance impact. So the way that you get around that is just like making the radius smaller on like certain lights, and then keep the ones that you want to have casting shadows, keep them as like shadow active, right? But disable it on like all the rest, and just make the radius smaller. And there's like a bunch of other optimization tricks, but yeah, I don't have time for that. It's also too specific and I wouldn't know where to start. So, yeah. So pay attention to light optimization. Try to fix the light first. Awesome! Thank you so much for posting your work, Alex. Looking forward to seeing this evolve. And welcome to the community. Happy to have you here. Okay, last one for today. Trees. Aladdin is asking a quick question. What do you do to stay motivated working on your projects? I don't rely on motivation. I rely on habit. Half an hour at least every day working on a project, whether you like it or not. And that's the simple truth. Like, because if I were to rely on just staying motivated, I would probably not work like 70% of the time. Right? Like, as anyone else would. Like, it basically comes down to building a habit where you don't have to rely on motivation anymore, but it's just, you just go into the rhythm, right? And in the beginning, you make it as small as possible. So half an hour. Sit down, you work for half an hour. If you don't feel like it, you stop. If you feel like it, you keep working. Because usually what happens is once you start doing it, like you force yourself to get into the groove. And that's going to keep you going for at least a while, right? And there's days where you're like, I don't want to do anything. Just do that half an hour and then you're done. I'm honestly talking about like after work, right? It depends on like how much time you get to spend, but like the best way is to start small and then build it up over time. But that's it. No worries. Justin, regarding textures, I'm curious about sourcing. Do studios frown frown upon new artists using it as a majority in their work? Or do they expect some sort of creative way of making it our own? Oh, like sourcing mega scans or something like that? It depends on how you use it. Like if you make like a material showcase and you don't make the materials yourself, that doesn't make sense, right? But if you do make like the focal point materials yourself, but then the rest of it you just use from somewhere else, that's fine. It just depends on how you use it, right? Okay, last one. With trees. Where are you? Here you go. Let's see. So, feedback about the sculpt, the kit, the composition, and the lighting. Okay. I mean, the kit looks nice. Like, it seems like it's working, right? Can't really see, like, too much repetition. Like, you've broken up these two pillars, which looks really nice. I'm trying 2 projects before this one, but for this one, I use Lord of the Rings reference. That's why I like it. Yeah. I feel like you got the scale down, you know, like, very epic scale. I like that. Yeah, the kit is looking good. Kit works really nice. No. So the kit works great. I think you brought this up yourself as well. But the interior is feeling pretty dark at the moment, right? Especially when you see the way that the composition and like the lighting works in the concept, right? You have this like bright spot in the middle, which is like pulling you in, along with like the leading lines and all that stuff, of course, right? That's the thing that you should also try to emulate. Like a quick way of doing that is just adding like a couple of spotlights that like roughly align to like the directionality of your directional light, and then just use fake spots, you know, to just like light in the interior and make it like really shiny, like really light inside. So yeah, using spotlights. Because yeah, if like a directional light doesn't work, then you just have to use something else, right? I think about the Moria entrance. Yeah, I feel like... Yeah, the Moria entrance was cool. Like just the Mines of Moria, you know, like the colossal epic scale of things. It's really interesting. So yeah, the interior lights, just do that with spotlights. I think the rest of it looks pretty good. You kind of have like the same colors, right? Apart from some of the blue tones that we see like in the background. Right, so what you could technically do is... if we go for blue tones in the background, you could use like these color correction regions, right? This is something that you can do at the end, or you can do it now. Color correction regions, and basically just encapsulate that whole region and just slightly change the tone of the color to be like a little bit more blue compared to the foreground, which is going to be like slightly more yellowish, right? And just pull the two apart. Like the way that I really look at like environment art is that I'm trying to replicate a lot of what the concept artists are doing by thinking about it in terms of layers, right? Like I'm thinking about it in terms of a painting. Like if I want to separate something, like I will specifically like add a color correction region or something like that to separate the values of the two things. So that could be like an interesting choice to do there, especially when you're also doing the lights. That's going to help a lot. I want to show the drone, which is a sketchfab asset. That's fine. I mean, from that distance. Yeah. I mean, you're gonna see it, right? But it's not gonna be as noticeable, so you can get away with something like really quick at that distance. Except if you want to do something like a close-up shot, right? Then you'll have to pay a little bit more attention to it. Composition and lighting. I feel like the composition is an easy one because you kind of replicated just the frame here, right? Again, what I think is personally missing is just a little bit of that shift, right? Just a little bit of that like imbalance. What they're doing here is actually really interesting, right? So they have like a very central like focal point, right? Like it's very central in the frame, but then actually where you enter the frame is like close to like the rule of thirds, right? Like a quick sketch. So you're coming in here and then you're going towards the center. So it's not as diagonal as you normally would have, but it's still a diagonal just towards the center. And on your end, we're kind of getting that as well. But I feel like a drone is kind of lost in between like what would be the center and like the rule of thirds somehow, right? Who would the framing be? It's so something like that. So probably move like a throne here or here, but now it's kind of like in between. That's what I would do. And then if you move it, maybe it would be cool to just move it here because I like what they're doing with the amount of, you know, like space you have here. And then you just duplicate like the structure that you have here and put that in the background, right? You don't have to make like new assets for it. You just duplicate it, put it in the background. And it kind of gives this like grandiose perspective of like, oh, it's not just one tower, but it's like a whole kingdom, right? You can see that this line is roughly at like the rule of thirds again, right? So like nicely weighted there. Yeah. I would honestly show more of the environment and then just duplicate the stuff all over. Just fake the background, you know? Because we want to have that large overview. In like epic scale, you know? Yeah, that's what I would do with the composition. Because it's a beautiful concept, right? And I love what they're doing with it. Like, really just building that world. It's not just a one tower, but it's like a massive kingdom. So cool. Love it so much. Okay, Thomas. This is going to be my feedback. Thank you so much for posting your work. This is looking awesome so far. I'm really excited to see where this is going. You got a really strong base layer already, right? Like the textures are looking really good. You got a really solid kit. I think most of the strength of this piece is going to come from the iterations that you're going to do on the lighting specifically, and really the atmosphere, right? That's going to be like the selling point of this environment going forward. So really try to iterate on that. Yeah. Awesome so far. Keep it up, man. All right. Thank you. No worries. Thank you too. All right. Had a pretty long one today. Jeez. Okay, I'm gonna make this short. I'm just gonna thank everyone for sharing their work. Thanks to everyone for being in the chat, for being engaging, for asking questions, and also for just being supportive of everyone else, right? I love to see that. I love the people in like the work in progress chat on our Discord where they're like helping each other. Amazing stuff. So it was a pleasure to be here, and I'll see everyone in next week's episode.